Hi, thank you for joining us today online. I'm Stacy, the family pastor here at Gold Creek. In just a minute, we are going to get started with service. If this is one of the first times that you have checked us out online, we would love to hear from you. So please text Gold Creek to the number on the screen right now, and one of our team members will get back to you. And if you have already been calling Gold Creek your home, we just want to thank you for being a part of that in so many ways, whether it's giving of your time or your resources. We literally couldn't do this without you. And if you haven't been a part of that and would like to be, there will be a number on the screen that you can text GC Mill Creek to, and a link will be provided to you that will walk you through any contributions. And we just want to thank you in advance. Let's go ahead and get started with service.
Surrounding me, let it break. Let your name still call the sea to still, the raging me to still every way. At your name, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, breathe, call these bones to live, call these lungs to sing once again. Whoa, I will praise Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, we sing again. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is a light forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. To quiet our feet today, would you quiet our feet right now? Jesus, 'cause your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is a light forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome.
Jonah, why did you try to run away? Did you think you could hide? How come you took off in the opposite direction? Why didn't you want to get up and go? Don't you know that you can't escape me, even in the depths of the sea? What took you so long to pray? Did you forget that I'm the only one who can save you? Don't you believe I'm the God of second chances? Jonah, is it right for you to be angry? Shouldn't I feel sorry for such a great city?
Hey, welcome. Man, I'm glad you've joined us. We're in this series called Big Fish. This is the second week of this series. And if you've posted your pictures online, then you're going to get drawn today. At our 10:30 service, we're going to draw somebody that's going to catch a fishing rod. You want to tag Gold Creek, and we want you to keep putting those pictures in there. They're really cool. But before we get into that, I want to show you some of the pictures. I just want to remind you, hey, I want to welcome you if you're a regular attender here. I know so many of you are connecting online. And I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. She goes, you guys have made this so good. It's such a good experience. And she was talking about her experience and thankful for what's going on here. Welcome. Thank you for making this a regular part of your worship experience. And then for a newcomer, we have lots of newcomers that have never been to our actual physical building. They only come either by online or they've come to our drive-in service. Man, we are glad you're here. We count you as a part of us. We want to get to know your story, and make sure you chat and let somebody know what's going on in your life. And for the investigator, somebody that's just kind of thinking about things, we welcome you. We thought about you when we had this service. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but we're outside here. This is so cool. We got a boat going by out here. We're about ready to get swamped by these waves. It's going to be kind of cool. So you're going to see us kind of going up and down. And we've got a nice rod in here. So here's my hope. We're fishing for kings out here, and we have a little competition. The staff is having a little competition, and if we get this king here today, I am going to get credit for the king here. If John, our boat captain, puts on a king and we get it in, then I might be the one that has the biggest fish in the staff. Well, I hope you're having fun. I hope you take time to go out fishing, take your family out fishing in this series we call Big Fish. Before we dive a little deeper into the message, I need to just tell you, 2 weeks from today, we can no longer be at our drive-in facility down at the farm. Thomas Family Farms have been so good for us. So let me just tell you what's happening. First of all, we're going to continue to do terrific online messages. What you see here, we're going to continue to film on site. We're going to do some pretty crazy stuff, really fun. And then secondly, we're moving our drive-in service to the side of our building. We're going to set the screen up on the side of our building. And if you still are at a place where you shouldn't be around other people, you're really COVID sensitive, I really encourage you to stay in the drive-in service. And you can drive in. We're going to continue to have a drive-in service right there in our neighborhood. Won't be able to honk like we normally have, but we're going to have a great time. Now, the third thing is we're going to actually have an in-house service, up to 250. Now, I have to tell you right ahead of time, I want to set your expectations. We want to have a quality experience. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a very safe thing. We're going to prepare the facilities. We're going to take care of each other. But as you come into our sanctuary, I want you to understand it's going to be like a restaurant. We're going to have little groups where you can sit with your family, and you'll sit together as a family, be social distance away. You wear your mask in, but when you get inside, you'll be able to take your mask off and have a worship experience that's mask-free if you want to. You can keep it on if you want to. But it's going to be a great experience. If you're not comfortable with that, hey, we encourage you to take our online service or to also think about this. You get a chance to just be at our drive-in service. So we're thinking of you, trying to provide the best way possible, and we encourage you. So let's get started. First of all, we got to show the big fish pictures. There's going to be a collage of pictures right now going up. They're just going to come one right after the other. Take a look at these pictures. They're amazing. You posted them online. We're picking from one of those pictures today. And we're doing this because we're talking about the biggest fish story ever, the fish story of Jonah. So let me just start with a picture that I have. Now, the picture that I have is going to be on the screen right now, is a picture from maybe when I was a little younger. You'll see I look a little younger, and it's a great big northern pike. Let me tell you that fish story. I was all alone, early in the morning. I got in the boat and I ran out to the mouth of the river, and I was just having fun. Just didn't think I'd catch anything, and I threw a lure, and I had this little tiny trout rod. I wasn't really prepared for a big fish, and this little tiny trout rod, you can see the rod in the picture there, and the lure that I caught it on is in the picture there, and I caught this huge fish, and it just kept taking line out, and I'd bring it in, taking line out, and bring it in, and my problem was I didn't have a net. And so the only thing I could do was stick my hand in his mouth, and if you've ever looked inside the mouth of a pike, you know it's full of teeth. I stuck my hand in his mouth, grabbed him, and threw him in the boat and cut up my hand, and I was so thrilled. I got all the way back. I had to put my sock around my hand to stop the bleeding, and I get all the way back, and I take the picture, and it's the biggest pike I've ever caught. Now, I don't know what your fish story is, but I know that every picture you saw earlier and every fish has a story, and that's the story we're talking about today. And the title of the message is called Rock Bottom. So let's think about this. We're going to talk about Jonah being in the bottom, underwater for 3 days in the belly of a fish. So let me ask you a warm-up question. How long is 3 days for you? I was thinking of the different ways 3 days can be different lengths. Like if it's 3 days before your vacation, those days they just last forever because you can't wait to go on your vacation. They just don't seem it just takes forever. And then if it's 3 days while you're on vacation, it's just like, what happened to those 3 days? It's so quick. 3 days is a perspective. You never know how long it's going to be. It's based on how you're feeling and what's going on in your life. Today, we're going to think about Jonah and the 3 days that he experienced. Now, last week, we left Jonah. He'd been thrown overboard, which I think is kind of funny because when Jonah got thrown overboard, it was because he wasn't willing to jump overboard himself. He told them that if he would go overboard, that they would not have to deal with the storm. So when they threw him overboard, the storm was gone. And that's where we pick up the story in Jonah chapter 1, verse 17. Now the Lord had arranged for a great fish to swallow Jonah. I love this verse because I like to fish. And if I can, I want to see a great big fish. I'd love to see a whale out here. I know they're out here. In fact, I just saw a fish jumping out here. I love to see great fish. But here he is. He goes overboard, and the Lord allows a great fish to swallow Jonah. And Jonah was inside the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Here's a question I have. Is this a fish story you believe? I did a lot of thinking about that. You know, we believe in the Bible. We believe the stories in the Bible have spiritual truth. They're powerful. And so I was thinking, how is this possible? And I came up with 3 possibilities. Maybe you can think about these on your own. First of all, there is some interesting facts of people that have lived. There's a famous story. James Bartlett, who was 21 years old, he was out whaling at the time, and he was out on a boat, and the boat was capsized by the whale, and he didn't show up. Later on, the whale was captured, and as they were cutting the whale open, they found James Bartlett inside the whale. He lived an additional 18 years. And they said about him, his skin turned a different color. And there was a time that he did a stint in the, there we go. We got a little boat horn here for you today. But there was a time when he did a stint in the circus as well. Well, I don't know. You know, we think about this story. We think how impossible this is. But here's what I would think. Maybe, first of all, maybe it just seemed like 3 days. Maybe he got into the belly of the whale and he couldn't keep track of times and it just seemed like 3 days. It was just like horrible, the worst thing ever, and it just seemed like it lasted forever. The second possibility is that maybe he was actually in there, that somehow, like James Bartlett, he survived. I don't know how, it seems like a miracle, but there's another possibility, and that is that maybe he actually died and that God raised him from the dead. But here's my point. As we look at this, as he was thrown overboard, let me remind you of something. Everybody has a rock bottom. Everyone has to hit bottom. When you're running from God, the only way that's going to change in your life is that you're going to run until you hit the bottom. Now, I thought today one of the best things we could do is just hear some stories of people that have hit rock bottom in their life. Watch these stories.
Hey guys, I'm John. I spent a lot of years keeping God at arm's length, struggling with alcohol addiction. I was hiding alcohol, I was sneaking alcohol, I was lying to my family, and to my friends, and to myself. If I kept going down the path that I was going, I knew it was going to cost me my marriage, my life, and possibly both. That's when I hit rock bottom. It was then that I reached out to God and asked Him for the strength to give me the courage and the strength to do the things that I knew I had to do to get sober and to stay sober.
We were going through some pretty tough times for several years in our marriage. Actually kind of lost count for a while of how long it had been. I'd always dreamed of my marriage to be something that's going to last forever. We made a commitment to one another and to God, and there came a point when I just didn't think that I could do it anymore. And that rock bottom really came when I felt like I couldn't control what was coming out of my mouth, and I couldn't control the feelings that were happening in my mind. And I knew I needed God, and I knew I needed to be praying, and I knew I needed the support of my community, and I knew that I needed to change my mind. I finally let go of that pride that I could do it, and I realized that it's God that needed to do it, that it's God that needed to intervene, and I needed to let Him do that instead of me.
My name is John, and my lowest moment, I had turned away from God. My selfish, self-centered behavior had taken over, and I thought I deserved something different. It got to the point where I was drunk one night and I had my gun in my mouth thinking I was just going to end it all because life, I just felt like life wasn't worth living anymore. And there was that small voice in the back of my mind saying that, about grace, and that, where sin did abound, grace did much more abound. And I wasn't really paying attention to it then, but as time progressed, that voice became louder and louder, and my thought of, I need to go back and restore my relationship with God. He didn't leave me, but I left Him, and I need to come back. I just walk around in joy every day. I start every morning by reading and praying, which I never did in the past, and I just have a new desire to do God's will.
I love those stories. Everybody has a story. When you really are ready to change, it's when you hit rock bottom. Well, Jonah had to hit rock bottom. And the time that he hit rock bottom was in the belly of the whale after 3 days. Look at this, Jonah 2:1. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from inside the fish. Now think about it. He didn't pray to God when the storm started. He didn't pray to God when the storm was really bad. He didn't pray to God when he got thrown overboard. He didn't pray to God while he was getting swallowed. He waited for 3 days in the middle of the whale. 3 days is enough. But it's interesting. This was the beginning of change. You know what? Prayer is always the beginning of prayer, of change. I've heard lots of people in the times that they prayed. Some of them were on drugs when they cried out to the Lord. Some of them were in the worst situations in their life. It's so simple that we miss it. And today, one of the great things in your life, if you've been running from God and you've hit rock bottom, you know, it just starts. The beginning of change starts when you just acknowledge God and pray to Him. Now here's what his prayer was. In verse 2, it says this, I cried out to the Lord in my great trouble, and He answered me. I called to you from the land of the dead, and the Lord, you heard me. This is where I kind of think that Jonah may have died, because it says he called from the land of the dead. Verse 3, it says, you threw me into the ocean depths, and I sank down to the heart of the sea. The mighty waters engulfed me, and I was buried beneath your wild and stormy waves. I ask the question all the time, does God cause trouble? Does He allow trouble? Do you know someone like Jonah who's been in trouble, at the edge of being in the bottom? Well, for Jonah, this was his water grave. He was buried in his own water grave. You know, I was thinking about that. I've been to the belly of a whale. I've been there a number of times. Maybe you have. One time it was at a homeless camp where I met a friend who was at the end of his life. He was at the worst place. He was at rock bottom. Another time when I was in an empty apartment with a man who his family had left him, and he was in terrible depression, and it was horrible. Another time it was a jail cell. Another time it was a bar. Everybody has their belly of the whale story. But what I love is that this picture is really a picture of Jesus. He went to the belly of the whale. Our sin took Him to the bottom. For 3 days He lived in hell, and He came back and resurrected, and He changed our lives. This picture, this story of Jonah, is really the story of how Jesus saved us. And the picture that you're going to see in a little bit is a picture of people in their own water grave, what we call baptism. Well, the story goes on, verse 4. Then I said to the Lord, you have driven me from your presence. I will look once more toward your holy temple. I sank beneath the waves, and the water closed over me. Seaweed wrapped itself around my head. I sank down to the very roots of the mountain. I was imprisoned in the earth, whose gates locked shut forever. But you, O Lord, my God, snatched me from the jaws of death. And I will remind you, it's only God that can save us. Whether it's a physical death or a spiritual death, it is only God that can save us. And He can use anything in His possible power to help you come to faith in Him. He wants you. This God that we have is incredibly merciful. He's waiting for you and for your prayer. I was thinking that your story and my story, they're all improbable. They're all stories that remind us how it's impossible with God. I just encourage you today, pray and listen to God. Verse 7 goes on and says this, as my life was slipping away, I remembered the Lord, and my earnest prayer went out to you in your holy temple. I like this. This is what we said before. The change starts when we start praying. He had an earnest prayer. You know, I notice how some people will swear. When things really go bad, they'll use God's name in vain. It's kind of like their prayer. It's their first words out of their mouth. And I don't think that kind of prayer is what it is, but there's a genuine prayer when all of a sudden and things are going bad, when you simply say, God, I can't do this. Some people say to me all the time, I don't know how to pray. You know, it's simple. God knows your heart. All you need to do is be quiet, turn the noise off in your life, and listen to God and acknowledge God. Jonah 2 verses 8 through 9 says this, those who worship false gods turn their backs on God's mercies, but I will offer sacrifices with songs of praise, and I will fulfill my vows, for my salvation comes from the Lord alone. Finally, you know what Jonah was saying? I'm going to quit running from God. I'm going to do what you ask him to do. Remember, Jonah was asked to go to Nineveh. And what he was saying is, I'm willing to change my direction. I'm going to quit going away from God, and I'm going to start following God. I ask that question of you today. What have you been running from? What have you been rebelling from? Today's your day to turn around. Well, the next part of the verse is really fun. Then the Lord ordered the fish to spit Jonah out onto the beach. This is cool. The ticket back for Jonah was not in a boat, but in a fish. And when he got close to the beach, he spit him up on the beach. And I can just imagine how bad Jonah smelled, how ugly he looked, what a picture he was when he showed up in Nineveh to share the message that God has for him. Just be a reminder today, don't ever say never. Don't ever say you won't do something, because God has a way of showing you how he's going to help you do it. For Jonah, that day was the day he was raised to new life. And you know that's exactly what's going to happen today. In a moment, you're going to see at our 10:30 service, you're going to see people be baptized. And so I want to tell you just a couple of their stories, and I want to hear your story. You know, there was one of these stories today was a girlfriend whose boy had just taken his life. Her boyfriend had just taken her life, and today that rock bottom for her has made her come to faith in Jesus Christ. A mom that had never gone to church before until this COVID thing happened has now decided to follow Jesus Christ. A family of 4 have made a huge change in their life, and today they're going to make their commitment. These are all stories, fish stories, baptism stories. I challenge you today to have your own story. Can I pray with you right now? Lord Jesus, right now, you know the hearts of everybody that's here. You know what's going on in everybody's life. You know what they're running from. You know how they need to change. I pray today that this will be the beginning of change for somebody in their life. And I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. I hope you'll share your story with us. There's someone online to chat with you right now. If you'll simply text onto the screen right now, it says my story. Just text my story, and we'll get a hold of you. We want to hear your story of how God saved you in your rock bottom moment. Again, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you again for joining us today. Be sure to check us out online at goldcreek.org or any of our social media sites to stay up to date of what's happening around Gold Creek. See you next time.